I'm Christopher Matthews. I'm the team leader for climate change in C4 and I'm going to introduce my two colleagues in a minute. But first I'm going to introduce you to this title of the session, the importance of research on REDD+ and on blue carbon for the policy process and research needs now and in the future. You may have found a little bit different name in the program. That's because we adapted this. And you may have also one different speaker on the program. Our good colleague Farm Tutui, she's in Australia right now, and so it's 11:30 in the night, and that was a little bit too late for her. So instead, we have here first Amy Duchel, who is team leader for forest and climate change in FAO, and also a good colleague and former colleague in C4 for I guess 20 years or 15 years. Okay, almost there. And we have Daniel Modiaso, who's professor in the International University in Bogor, Indonesia, but he's also a colleague in C4, working on the peatland program that we have for many years, also 15 years. But you work with us longer, no, right? 22. Well, he's also the president of the Academy of Science of Indonesia, so. A lot of expertise, I guess. And I just listened to your other interview this morning where you said you had 30 cops behind you. So there's a lot of cops behind his belt. Yeah. So, and we want to talk about the role of research because today is the Science, Technology and Innovation Day in this forest pavilion. So it's the last session almost, and we're going to talk about science. Don't run out yet. We hope to make it interesting for you. So I want to start with Amy actually. So where has science, in your view, because we have been working together on REDD+ for a long time, and actually Amy has also headed that program for some time while I was doing different things. So what is your experience with REDD+, science for REDD+, what has it achieved? What is there that wouldn't be there without science? Or what did this research achieve?
Okay, thanks so much, Christopher, for the invitation. It's nice to be able to talk science again. I appreciate it. I think there's probably three areas of research that really enabled REDD+ to get off the ground. And the first was all of the work that was done on anthropogenic emissions from land use. I mean, the fact that we can say with confidence, halting and reversing deforestation can reduce 11% of emissions, and all the work that's been done on sinks, that's because of decades of work on anthropogenic emissions from land use. So I think, and it was really interesting, I was in a session of the IPCC earlier today and with Giacomo Grassi, and it was really interesting because they brought together colleagues from the global modeling side and the national greenhouse gas inventory side because it's still trying to resolve a lot of that science, that there, those processes come at the question from two different ways, and it obviously has huge policy implications. But that's what really raised forestry to the top of the climate agenda. So that's the basis for REDD+. I think the second area of work was all of the work on drivers, and that's related to the first area, but really the understanding of the contribution of especially unsustainable agriculture to deforestation. And so that when the whole REDD+ really started, we were sort of in the forest sector, and we realized very quickly that no, we had to work across the landscape because the drivers were not necessarily inside the forest sector. And then probably the third area of work, but this is a big area of work, but all of the governance work. And I would say not only in terms of understanding the political economy of deforestation, but also the kinds of governance mechanisms that could enable reductions in deforestation, including management by indigenous peoples and local communities, and how that research really coincided with the no rights, no REDD call at the very beginning of REDD+, and so the key role that indigenous peoples play in protecting the world's forests. So I think those 3 lines of research had direct policy impact and were fundamental in the construction of REDD+.
Can I maybe ask an additional question? I'm actually surprised you didn't mention research on benefits for households or communities, because that was your own area. So didn't you see that as so important, like going with the other 3, or?
So I think that would be important now, because I think one of the things that maybe we did too much in the REDD+ research at CIFOR, and the only reason we did this is because there was nothing else to study, but we put a lot of attention at the household level on the demonstration projects. So as you remember in COP13 in Bali, there was a call for REDD+ demonstration projects as a way to transition to jurisdictional REDD. But the idea wasn't to stay there. And so when you look at Article 5 of the Paris Agreement, that's really at the jurisdictional level. And so I think, and in fact, a lot of the current confusion we have and some of the discreditation of carbon markets is because of project level work on things that are labeled REDD+ projects, but aren't necessarily REDD+. In fact. And so I think ultimately that's created quite a bit of confusion including in terms of trust in forest carbon markets. So we can talk about future directions next, but so that's why I don't emphasize that area right now. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Amy. So Daniel, you have been also working with research, but not necessarily on REDD+, of course, but mostly focused on peatlands, tropical peatland forests, and mangroves. So what's your experience with the role of science there?
Right. So I've been very much involved in the MRV side of the REDD+, and I think it's also ensure the credibility of project, whether it's going to be national or subnational level. Having a strong MRV capacity is very important. And during that period, I've been working, as you said, mainly on wetland and peatland and mangrove. And it's very timely that during the process, the IPCC attracted us to contribute on the IPCC guideline on wetland. So the supplement of that guideline, especially for wetland, is very much contributed by our team, if you wish. We've been leading through 3 chapters of the 5 chapter of the IPCC guideline for draining peatland, rewetting peatland on mangrove, and most of the emission factors, mainly coming from our research and our partners, put it in the emission factors, which is very important for country to calculate and do their inventory, especially for wetland. So I think what is the striking thing from the exercise is that so much carbon is stored below the ground. And this has been underestimated because most of this study are based on most of the project are based on the classical forestry practices where you see forest or tree as carbon storage. But you have 5-10 times higher below the ground. And this is very important to put in the negotiating table, because you can treat it like oil. This is brown or blue oil in it. So if you trying to convince people not to emit fossil burning, then why don't you also appreciate the way people are conserving below ground carbon? It's been stored there for 15,000 years, 20,000 years. It's just like brown oil, brown coal, and it's equally important to have that numbers as well. Yeah.
It would have become the oil of the future, 100,000 years from now, or million years.
Exactly.
But now we are cutting it out. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's super interesting. So how does it work then to bring this this MRV, the emission factors, to collaborate with the country, like in your case Indonesia, but you have also worked in other countries?
Yeah, that's right. Indonesia is one. We try to help establishing the so-called forest reference emission level with the sort of basic approaches using the chains of land cover, but also inducing the idea of calculating or including soil carbon and also non-CO2 gases, which is equally important because N2O and methane has much more global warming potential. So if you don't include them, you miss the boat.
We don't want to miss the boat. Okay, thank you. So, Amy, looking forward, looking to the future. Now you said already what you want to say, and maybe have a few more points. But so, what would be the role of science, looking at the next 5 to 10 years, particularly with regard to REDD+?
Yeah, so I think again, there's a few areas where I would focus, especially now. It's been interesting, having been at C4 for so long and working on REDD+ from a science perspective, and then moving to FAO and seeing how FAO is supporting countries in terms of REDD+ implementation. And so I have a certain clarity, I think, of what I would recommend to the science community working on REDD+ to really, meet current needs. I think one of them, and it's building off of this impact evaluation work that we did do at C4, and I have to say that was absolutely important, setting up this really quasi-experimental design, and it focused on REDD+ projects, but easily that could be applied to jurisdictional REDD+ programs, because everybody wants to know what the impact of interventions are, whether it's on forests or local people. And to be able to do that, you really need to have a before-after control intervention design, because otherwise you're never going to be able to actually say what was the impact of a given intervention. And I think all of that work from the Global Comparative Study on REDD+ allowed us to really refine that scientific methodology of understanding what the impact of given interventions were, whether they were restrictions on land use, payments for environmental services, enabling measures, and the bundle of those, how those were working together. We now know that that is possible to tease out and really understand impact on the ground. And so I would say, apply those methods to jurisdictional REDD+, especially because right now many agreements are being signed. The state of Pará is developing with the LEAF Coalition an emissions reduction program. This is the time actually that before-after control intervention accompanying research could actually inform the adaptive management of such a program. So I would definitely focus on that, but at the jurisdictional scale. I think the other area of research that absolutely has to be undertaken is understanding that the forests that are, in all of the models and in, that we're counting on in terms of carbon sink are not the same forests of yesterday. And I think we see that in real time, and we're seeing that the capacity of the land sink is changing. And it's because of climate change and the intensity and frequency of wildfires and other climate-fueled stressors. So I think more research on understanding what those changes in terms of capacity of forests and trees. We're putting a lot of demand on forests and trees to save us, and including calls for substitution in the building sector, which are absolutely important and viable. It's just that what is the limit that forests and trees can do to actually help us without massively reducing emissions from energy sector? So I think those two would be somewhere where I would focus.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, the last point, actually, we want forests as buffers and as offsets for other deeds, like using fossil fuels. We want also, but at the same time, when we get out of fossil fuels, we want to get all these products from the biomass that comes out of forests. So somewhere it doesn't fit, right? And we don't have a good number on how to make it fit, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And on your first point, you said so the social effect research, but I remember also it was very complicated work. It was very costly work because it required a lot of actually interviewers going to the field. It cost a lot of time. So have you somehow have a better understanding now of what works better and what can be maybe dropped
Yeah.
from these things?
Yeah, I mean, I think for those detailed socioeconomic impacts, the only way is to really have field data. But there are many sources of secondary data and census data and sort of other kinds of data that can be leveraged in a quasi-experimental design that can give you a sense and a signal of socioeconomic impact of different intervention types. And those could be complemented by something a little bit less costly, like village focus groups and things like that, to actually triangulate different data sources. Indeed, I mean, we did interviews with, I think, 4,000 households or something like that in 6 countries. That was extremely costly and extremely rich data, and I hope more papers will continue to come out of those data sets, because they were 3 points in time: 2010, 2014, and 2018. And so having that kind of rich longitudinal information about rural households that are forest dependent and what different interventions mean for them, I don't think there's another data set in the world that exists like that. So please, if anyone's listening online and you're an econometrician, use those data, because they're quite a gold mine. Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. Good propaganda break. Okay, thanks, Amy. Okay, Daniel, what's your take on the future role for research to get things going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Okay, well, we're just in the middle of a process of influencing or helping national government to include this work in the NDC processes. So working together with FAO, we identify a number of countries who are very keen to include blue carbon in the NDC. And that's very timely, because it's going to be in the next global stocktake, and see how blue carbon countries will respond on that. Not only from the market point of view, but also from the perspective of how local community will be part of it. So in the NDC, it's very hard to see how this national kind of reporting system engages with the community. And at the same time, I'm also a bit of infected with the social science work and trying to consider, okay, I think this is the right time to look at that, especially when you're looking and working with coastal community. And you're talking about benefit sharing and those kind of stuff. They are really the one who should, to be involved in this, should be involved in this exercise. And certainly, issues like nutrition, intake, and diet, and those kind of stuff are very, very relevant for the less fortunate group of community in the coastal zone. And when we look at that, when people are trying to invest, quote unquote, on something related to carbon benefits or carbon credit, we invited them also to look at the potential engagement with the local community on that, what they can benefit from it. Yeah.
So linking these projects to NDC so they can actually be reported, getting social data from those places.
Right.
Nutrition, poverty.
We involve 15 countries NDC in the NDC to look at how they are, putting this component in their NDC, in addition to carbon, of course.
I recently heard there are only 11 blue carbon projects in the world. Is that your understanding?
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be done, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. In Indonesia alone, there are 30 something on the table, but it's not been flying yet. So we identify a number of issues related to methodology, standard, and those kind of stuff. So there are some governance and regulatory framework as well left behind.
Do we understand the biophysics? I mean, we understand a lot now of how much biomass is in peatlands and so on, but do we understand the same quality of understanding the blue or not yet?
Right. Biophysics is very straightforward. You can repeat what you know here and do the same thing with the same tool, but not governance and regulatory framework. You have to be very mindful about the system, how things work between national and local government. They are all different. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, to conclude, a little bit fun question. What was it that most excited you doing this work? What was really fun? Yeah, of course. Okay. Or 3 or 5. Or talk for 2 hours.
I mean, one of them actually relates to this space, that it was very strategic of C4, you know, when REDD Plus was gaining a lot of attention to convene the Forest Day at the COPs. And at the same time, the global comparative study on REDD Plus was initiated. So we as scientists were at the forefront of a policy process that was just surging. And that was extremely exciting. And it was also just, I think, for the scientists involved, for us to really understand how some of the policy world worked and to try to figure out how best to bring in the information. And I think the information was really used in the process. I know it was, because people tell me until today that C4 was the reference for a lot of the REDD Plus work, both at the national, subnational, MRV type issues. So that was really nice. And then for me personally, in the last phase, we had PhD students that were basically collecting all of this field data as part of their own PhD theses. And they were from Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Indonesia. And so it was really nice because we brought them into this global research project, and they were then able to, they did the fieldwork as part of their own PhD, but then of course it helped us, and we had this wonderful network of them, and I see them all the time. There are 2 of them here at this conference. I saw a few others at the FLAIR conference in Rome. And so there's still this really nice network of young students, the next generation of scientists who are working on policy relevant issues. Yeah.
I like to pick up that last point about the young generation. It's like you so many years ago, right?
That's like me.
And I think we should keep saying that, you know, this is inherited to young generation. I've been talking about is 30 COPs and things like that. And think about these young people. How can they pick up the message now for to be projected for their future? I think this is very crucial thing. Be it science, numbers. We keep talking about the politics of numbers in our group, and suddenly they should know what's going on. And it's part of the capacity building or conveying the, what is it that, when you are running, you give what the baton to them. Yeah. Look, we know this already, but many things still not known yet. Yeah. And that's their task. And suddenly they should not start from scratch. Yeah. So very important.
Yes. Okay. What else did excite you with the research, being a researcher?
Right. So being there for so many years and looking at these numbers, I think we cannot improve the number substantially, significantly, if we put more resources in it. So what we need to do, I think, is to spread the message about the methodology, the way we do it, and let them do it themselves. And the tool that we've been given should be used or can be improved in the future. And certainly that should not be more costly than, you know, social science work. It should be cheaper and cheaper.
Anything that comes to mind to close this up? Anything else?
The last sentence.
Well, I found out the other night that it was actually Pak Daniel who is the reason for the Forest Day, the original Forest Day. I didn't know that, so he is a legend in many ways. Right. Yes.
Make my tears fall.
Yes.
Okay, here it comes all together. So if you see me trembling not because I'm so excited about this event, but because it's really freezing cold here. We're talking about tropical forests, but there's cold wind coming. So, but I thought it was a great session. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah, really cool to have this and a session among friends.
Yes, so thank you so much.
Thank you for your attention. Thank you.